Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Good morning. Welcome to the State of Freedom. Louisiana's election system didn't become what it is today by accident. It was built through years of legislation, influence, and shifting the balance of power. But how did we get here? And more importantly, where do we go from here? This morning, Chris and I are going to take a retrospective look at the laws and forces that shaped Louisiana's elections, the authorities granted to the Secretary of State's office, the questions being raised about transparency and trust, and whether Louisiana is willing to change course before more resources are invested into a system that many citizens, including us, no longer believe serves them. Well, I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the watchdog-in-chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander, and we're coming to y'all live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Please take a moment, hit the thumbs up, share, leave some comments, get in the chat. Today, you're probably going to really want to be in the chat, and you can also catch us later on our audio-only podcast platforms. And I think that's it. I didn't tell you what day it is. Hopefully you know, but if you don't, it's Thursday, July 23rd. It's 10:03 a.m. Morning, Chris.
Good morning, Danielle. How are you doing?
I'm excellent.
I woke up this morning and I'm thinking about sharing, the State of Freedom and your admonition always to share it. I'm literally in my head is share, share, share. How can we do it? How can we do it? Share, share, share. So share the State of Freedom.
That's right. Share it.
So important.
It is. It helps us out. It helps us out a lot. And we want to make sure that everybody in Louisiana knows we exist so that they have the opportunity to know the truth about what's going on, I guess, politically. I would say at the legislature, but it's some days it's bigger than that.
And in their government.
And in their government. That's right. All right. Well, let me read the scripture of the day. And I was promising Chris before we came on that we would be salt and light today. So bring the light first and the salt will probably come later.
And I think both have firm scriptural foundation.
They do. All right. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 25 and 26. Let's see. All right. Make very sure that you never refuse to listen to God when he speaks. For the God who spoke on earth from Mount Sinai is the same God who now speaks from heaven. Those who heard him speak his living word on earth found nowhere to hide. So what chance is there for us to escape if we turn our backs on God and refuse to hear his warnings as he speaks from heaven? The earth was rocked at the sound of his voice from the mountain, but now he has promised, once and for all, I will not only shake the systems of the world, but also the unseen powers in the heavenly realm. And I feel this is a warning that is speaking directly to me and perhaps to all of us right now, that we should not be dismissive of the voice of the Lord, especially that still small voice. We probably won't hear it audibly, right? But it's that voice inside of us that gives us instruction. Sometimes it seems out of nowhere. Sometimes it's a little puzzling, like, where did that come from? It may encourage us to reach out to people we haven't talked to in a long time, or it might encourage us, prompt us to help a stranger in some way. But we are in the time of the Lord shaking the world systems, so we don't have the luxury of delay. One of my pastors used to say it this way: delayed obedience is disobedience. So, and I think y'all can feel it. I feel there's an urgency in the spirit realm right now. And if you hear an instruction from the Lord, it may come in the form of words that grab your heart as you listen to a podcast or a TV show. It could be when you're reading your Bible or sitting in a church service. It could be the silence while you're washing the dishes or driving down the road, or it could be from the mouth of your grandkid. However the Lord speaks to you, whenever he speaks to you, seize the moment and do what he says. Because I was reminded this morning that it's better to feel foolish for a few moments than to live with the regret of not having done what the Lord asked us to do.
Danielle, one of the biggest problems listening to the Lord, you know, your whole prayer was centered on listening to the Lord, listening. And that means we have to stop talking long enough to listen.
True.
Sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as well, prayer consists of simply talking, and you tend to kind of get in a routine in prayer where you're doing all the talking and you're expecting the Lord to do all the listening. Well, if we're going to listen to what he has to say, we have to stop talking and we have to be still and we have to be quiet and allow him. Prayer is two-way.
Yeah.
Prayer is not just us telling the Lord what we want, but listening to what the Lord wants. And we have got to be disciplined enough, I think, to put away all of the distractions, for a few minutes, maybe longer, hopefully, each day in the quiet to listen to the still, quiet voice of the Lord. I don't think God likes competing with all of the extraneous noise and sounds and influences of the world. There's a reason why it's called the still, quiet voice of the Holy Spirit. That means we should be in a place of quiet and really open our hearts to try to listen to him. And it takes a certain amount of discipline to do that.
Yeah.
And I think, but I think it's hugely important just to remember that prayer is really a conversation with God, and it's our response to his grace ultimately. And we can't really be beneficiaries of his grace if we don't sit still alone in the quiet long enough to hear what he has to say. So I
Yeah.
think that's really, really important. I think that's a massive problem, frankly, in our society right now.
Well, I think you make a great point, Chris. I didn't even think about the part that we actually have to quiet ourselves to be able to hear and listen. But how can we know what it is we're supposed to be doing? Are we just going to go around and do whatever we think is best? You and I have learned that doesn't get us, doesn't get us very far. You have to hear from the Lord about what it is you're supposed to be doing so that you could be effective. Otherwise, we're spinning our wheels.
Yes, Danielle, John Wesley, who's the founder of Methodism, where we had our meeting, not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, he used to spend, and I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but he used to spend 2 or 3 hours every single morning before he did anything else,
Yeah.
simply quiet, quiet, quiet before the Lord with no distractions before he did anything else. And I think that having that sort of foundation every day is what allowed him, I think, to travel 250,000 miles on horseback, preaching to wherever and whomever would listen to him.
Yeah.
What an extraordinary figure he was, and again, he's such an example of the importance. Not saying that everybody needs to spend 3 hours every day in prayer, but I think a disciplined daily set aside for God, where it's just you and him alone, I think is massively important if we're going to stay on the right track and truly understand what his directives are.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, Danielle, the devil can be very, very subtle, and we can be so convinced that we're doing God's will and that our motives are pure, and yet we end up in a place at the end of our lives where Jesus says, sorry, I never knew you. I
Yeah.
don't want Jesus to look at me and say, look, I know you did all these things, this, that, and the other, but where was I?
Hmm.
Where was I in the process? And were you glorifying me or were you glorifying yourself? And did you ever take the time to sit and truly listen to my spirit and what I wanted you to do? I don't want him telling me that. So I'm trying on a daily basis to do what I'm prescribing for our viewers.
Yeah. Well, I love that, Chris. I think I mean, it's a weighty, serious thing, what you just said. And I had General Holt on for the Love of Freedom yesterday, and we were talking about something right along these lines of before you get involved in the receiving mode of the day, where you're receiving phone calls, looking at media, getting text messages and being barraged by all kinds of information, requests, pulls on on you to do things. It, you need to be grounded in the Lord. You need to have some time, some quiet space with him to just sit and listen so that you can be effective during the day. I mean, I know when I would wake up and just literally look at my phone first thing and start working first thing, start responding to emails right away, I was as cranky and as mad as a hornet. I mean, that's not a way to live. If you can start out setting your own tone for the day with the Lord, you're in a much better shape. At least I was. I'll tell you.
Much better shape. And
Yeah.
it's just a psychological assertion that this world does not control me.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the master of this day through Christ's grace. The day is not the master of me. And it's just a way of setting that precedent very, very early in the day. Very difficult to do, Danielle. And
Yeah.
it's amazing how when you really, really try to pray and do what we're talking about, it's right at those moments when all of these thoughts will come flooding into your head because the devil wants nothing more than to keep us from God and to distract us from the things of God. It's amazing how the devil, how subtle he is,
Yeah.
how sophisticated he is.
And I got
But
one piece of really practical advice that I might share on that, Chris, which is I got permission, so to speak, from a pastor. When you're praying and you think of all the things you need to do, get a pen, get your notebook, write it down, and then you're not going to have to keep thinking about it. Just get it out of your head, put it on paper, and come back to prayer. It's not, God's not going to try and make you hold that in your thoughts while you're also trying to listen to Him.
yes, exactly. And the tendency, Danielle, is I don't have time for prayer. Prayer is just, okay, so if I'm going to do this, I'm going to sit for 5 minutes, I'm going to do this. Okay, I got this done and I'm moving on. Almost like it's obligatory, but it
Yeah.
really should be the foundation of everything that we do.
And a
No
joy.
question about that. And by the way, I absolutely loved General Holt's interview yesterday, Daniel. I thought it was
Ah,
absolutely outstanding. I
thank
was
you.
stunned. I was stunned by the federal legislation that's pending, 219, I think he said, in the NDAA, which essentially weds the United States military to Israeli military and
Yeah.
Israeli intelligence with respect to our military operations. It would obligate us, if I understood him correctly, to share all of our intelligence with the Israeli government.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that not a violation of our constitutional sovereignty? Why is this even being considered in the United States Congress? And hopefully, President Trump will put the hiatus on this. I laughed yesterday when General Holt was saying, I know that President Trump is speaking in Marietta, Georgia. I think that's his high school where
Mm-hmm.
General Holt went. But he said, but I hope he gets back to Washington, D.C. very quickly because this is very, very sinister.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in, Chris. It was a very fun conversation. I really enjoy talking to him,
Well, I like
especially.
listening to and you're very skilled. And so I
Oh,
enjoy listening.
you're the best. Well, that's a warm and fuzzy note for us to start talking about some things that may get people a little hot under the collar. We wanted to give a retrospective today on how we got to where we are with respect to the Secretary of State's office having so much consolidated power over our elections. When we talk to people across the country, Chris, they're like, okay, well, the power belongs to the clerks, and the clerks get to choose the voting system. So the localities, the counties in other states, or the municipalities in some cases, get to direct the way that their elections are handled. Not so in Louisiana. Not even close. We have what may be the only top-down system in the country. I'm not sure if it is, but it is certainly a fully top-down system. You and I have talked, I believe, at length about the fact that the clerks of court even behave as if Nancy Landry or the Secretary of State, whoever's sitting in that office, is their boss, even though we elect them. And that is a function of the structure, and it's a function of, I guess, Huey P. Long era politics in a way, where everybody looks to Baton Rouge for leadership, and that's where the power and control tends to reside. But you and I would like to see things look very, very differently than that. I wanted to start today, if you don't mind, Chris. Back in 2020, you were among the wide-eyed patriots who understood that there was something very wrong after 2020's election, and the legislative session that happened after that, I guess, had a lot of debate and had a lot of rancor around it because, there, as far as I can tell, and love to get your perspective on this because you were there, the legislators did the kind of gaslighting that we're pretty used to by now, probably weren't used to it at the time, that said, our elections, look, Trump won in Louisiana. How could our elections have been stolen? How could there be any problems with our election system because Trump won? And we've had people like Christy Hike come on and say, yeah, but what about the primaries? What about the chipping away, the erosion of the conservative voter base that really is Louisiana's, value base and voting base? And so would you bring us back, if you would, to 2020, to the legislation that started laying the groundwork for how our voting system was going to be transformed?
After 2020, Danielle, and all the controversy regarding the 2020 election, the legislature comes in and debates and passes SB 221, which became Act 408. And the ostensible purpose of the legislation was to secure our voting system in Louisiana. And one of the recommendations, or one of the requirements in that bill, was the setting up of a voting system commission that would consider various alternatives with regard to the implementation of a new and revised voting system in Louisiana. And one of the options in the bill that the Voting System Commission would have would be to recommend a secure hand-marked paper ballot system. One of the possibilities also was a purely electronic voting system with the use of ballot marking devices, or a combination of both. The ultimate objective, Danielle, of grassroots citizens across the state was to take us to a secure hand-marked paper ballot system. And Act 408 created...
480.
480, yeah, created that option. And so this voting system commission was set up in order to evaluate different possibilities. And Alex Halderman came at the Secretary of State's request and testified before the voting system commission, clearly making the recommendation that electronic voting systems, computer-based voting systems, ballot marking devices are vulnerable to hacking by very sophisticated cyber criminals and very attractive target. They're simply not safe. And on that basis, votes can be switched, manipulated, and all the rest of it. And so he recommended very clearly that Louisiana go to a secure, hand-marked, serialized paper ballot voting system with very limited exceptions, and that would be the exception of the disabled, those who are unable to mark a paper ballot, which is less than 10% of the population of Louisiana. That is the clear recommendation he made to the Voting System Commission. Well, what did the Voting System Commission ultimately recommend? Basically nothing. They recommended either a pure ballot marking device, i.e. electronic system, a pure hand-marked paper ballot system, or some hybrid of both. So basically, they said, here's Secretary of State, here are all the options that you have, but the Voting System Commission did not make a clear, vigorous, robust recommendation that we transition to a secure hand-marked paper ballot system. So really, I hate to say it, with the exception of Dale Clary, who I think made some very elucidating comments and had some great insights, that Voting System Commission, which was made up largely of bureaucrats and politicians, really accomplished little or nothing, either to diminish the power of the Secretary of State or to direct the Secretary of State to move to a secure hand-marked paper ballot system. That's basically what happened there. And I think here we are now, right?
Here we are now. And I guess I may have misspoken. So because of what happened in 2020, this must have been the 2021 legislative session, right?
It was 2021. It was just after the 2020 election, exactly. And again, the whole purpose of Act 480 was to try and secure our voting system in Louisiana to prevent some of the fraud that we know clearly occurred in 2020.
Yeah,
absolutely. The whole impetus for that was 2020, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then moving forward, there were some bills once this legislature, this cohort, the 2020, the ones who raised their right hand in 2024, got into office. And there's a couple that we wanted to pull out for folks. The first was House Bill 114 in the 2024 regular session by Representative Les Farnham. And this was his annual voter roll canvass. And if we have any viewers who are OGs and have been with us from the beginning, you might recall that in 2023, when we first kicked off audio only, right out the gate, he had also brought a bill that did fail that year in 2023 for an annual voter roll canvass, but it did pass in some form in 2024, right, Chris?
It did pass in some form in 2024, and we supported the bill, and it at least in original form, it would have required a manual, boots on the ground annual canvass of all registered voters in Louisiana. Ultimately, it became more or less an electronic, i.e., canvass by mail, and so it really was not a direct person-to-person canvass, which is what we had hoped for and wanted. And so, in fact, Danielle, during that time, I'll never forget, a number of grassroots citizens, the CAG and others, got together and actually did a parish-wide canvass out in Ascension Parish. And what we discovered, and Dr. Russ can talk to us more about this, was really very, very troubling. I mean, places where people who are registered to vote in Louisiana, abandoned houses, empty houses, dead, no longer live in Louisiana. And those things simply cannot be captured and discovered unless you're doing a real boots on the ground canvass, which unfortunately Les Farnham's bill does not call for. And so I think, so ultimately, I don't think the annual canvass, the final version of that bill really accomplishes what we had hoped it would accomplish.
Yeah, and I was really steamed that it didn't, Chris, because I participated in the voter canvass that Dr. Russ led in Terrebonne back in, I guess, I don't remember exactly what year it was. It probably was 2023. And that was after Hurricane Ida. So it might have been 2024. I'm getting my, anyway, I think Ida came and destroyed Terrebonne in 2021. So all that to say, we did a boots on the ground canvass here, and homes are gone. Literal homes are gone. I drove up into one lady's driveway, and she said, well, she's living in Mississippi. She's having to commute home on the weekends to rebuild her house. It was absolute mayhem. And that is something you cannot find out electronically. Google Maps is not going to help you. You have to have people going door to door to find out, hey, is this house still even here? Did these people have to leave the area? Do they live in Terrebonne now? Do they live in Monroe now? Do they live in Hawaii now? Could be anywhere.
Exactly. Another point, Danielle, to add to yours, Katie, one of my wife's sisters has been living in Europe now for 30 years. She hasn't lived in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, for that long. Don't you think an annual boots on the ground canvas, someone would have gone to her home address when she was growing up, and they would have found out very quickly, no, she doesn't live in here anymore. She hasn't lived in the United States in 30 years. Maybe
Yeah.
she should be removed from the Louisiana voter registration database and not be a registered voter in Louisiana anymore. As far as I know, up until very recently, and she may still be in the Louisiana voter database as a registered voter in Louisiana. And that's just one example. And how many other examples and cases are there of that, Danielle? Without a boots on the ground annual canvas that is really meaningful, we're really tilting at windmills here.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just remind people of what Edward King Solomon said when he came on I don't know, months ago now, maybe last year or something. He said, why do we even need voter rolls? They can only be corrupted. One option is just to not have voter rolls and people bring a utility bill and a proof of citizenship and residency to whenever you go vote. And I'm like, you know what? It might be a little extra hassle, but I think it's worth it to have clean elections.
It seems like a it doesn't seem like a very onerous requirement, does it, Danielle? In other
No,
words, what you're saying is after every election, the slate is clean. And if you want to, even though you came in and you legally voted this past time, at the very next election, you have to bring the exact same proof that you did last time. So
yeah,
basically, it begins anew with every election. That's what you're saying, and that would do away with the possibility of having dirty voter rolls, because what you're saying is there wouldn't really be any voter rolls at all. People would have
exactly.
to provide new, authentic proof every time they go vote to vote. And I think that how is that when you're talking about the exercise of a fundamental right, when you're talking about an activity that results in who governs us, who leads us, who directs and determines policy for the state of Louisiana, isn't that process important enough to justify that type of an obligation and that type of? I think it is. I really think it is.
I think it is, yeah. So that's my ultimate goal on that. I think, because one, we know that any electronic holding of voter rolls is highly manipulable, highly permeable. All of us got just as Dr. Russ reminded us on Tuesday, Chris, all of us got our IDs hacked, our personal data hacked when the OMV was breached a number of years ago. So don't tell me that our voter roll information is somehow secure by the same people who didn't secure our same information in another platform. That's ludicrous.
It
And
is, it is absolutely ludicrous, and there's no reason to believe that any electronic-based voting system would be any more secure than the DMV. I mean, what assurance do we have that there's any greater security in that system than there is in the cyber system that governs DMV? I don't see any evidence of that. Do you?
no, I don't see, there's no evidence of it. There's actually evidence pointing to the fact that it would absolutely be insecure. If we,
Including, Danielle, including the most recent pronouncement from Mark Wayne Mullen of DHS, who
yeah,
specifically said 5 days ago that there's a backdoor hacking mechanism on these electronic voting systems. So yes, I agree with you. I was going to say, so just to clarify your point here, Danielle, SB 436, I know we'll talk about it in a little bit, but that was Facey's bill from a couple of years ago. Let's just assume that law requiring satisfactory proof of American citizenship anytime someone tries to register to vote, assuming that law was being vigorously enforced, you're saying that nonetheless, you believe that every time a person goes to vote, even after they have been legally registered to vote, every time they vote, they should have to provide evidence of citizenship anew.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk about when we helped Iraq have their elections after we invaded Iraq, and that we'll just put all of the baggage regarding that aside. Do you think that they had voter rolls in Iraq? No.
Um,
People just came. they probably provided some kind of proof of something, and then they got their finger stamp purple after they voted. They didn't need voter rolls.
Exactly. And where do you think so photo ID, Danielle, that President Trump has talked about having a photo ID. Does a photo ID necessarily establish or verify that a person is an American citizen when they
No,
go?
because they've been registering illegals for driver's licenses. But I believe, Chris, that this past session, was it Valerie Hodges, Senator Hodges, maybe had a bill, and it made it so that you would have it indicated, your citizenship would be indicated on your driver's license.
I believe that was Dodie Horton.
Jody Horton. Okay.
Yes, and yet that bill, yes, when you got your driver's license, but in another context, with other legislation, the Secretary of State and someone in her office said that the DMV is simply not really trained to do that. The DMV
Guess
is
what?
trained.
Guess what? I think these people at the DMV are probably skilled people. They're people that know how to learn something. I bet if you teach them a new procedure, Chris, and put a little manual in front of them, they could follow it.
I bet you they could, and I bet
How
you.
insane is that? That they're not trained? Well, guess what? So you just hire people that already only know what to do already, and you don't train anybody?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Good
So
grief.
I'm very, very intrigued, Danielle, by your position that every time a Louisiana person, someone wants to go, not only register to vote, but actually vote, they should be required to produce satisfactory evidence of their citizenship. And it's not, you know, but apart from that, even the current law that's currently enforceable that was passed that became effective in January of 2025, which requires proof of citizenship when a person registers to vote, even that is not being enforced. And there's been very, very little guidance by the Secretary of State down to the registrars of voters. It's just not been enforced satisfactorily. It's been on the books since January of 2025. I think that's absolutely just really reprehensible
Yeah.
that the registrars would have received so little guidance, so little structured directive from the Secretary of State on that law and enforcing it.
Not so little, none as far as I can tell,
None.
Chris.
Really, really zero.
Yeah.
Zero directive. So anyway,
So we camped out on that a little bit longer than
yeah.
I anticipated, but there's plenty more where that came from. Also in 2024, House Bill 856 by Representative Mike Johnson. This attempted, and you can dig into this more, Chris. I believe it attempted to vest total authority for voting systems in the Secretary of State, but it did fail in this attempt.
It did fail in this attempt. Originally, 856 and 2024, Danielle, all it did was say that the Secretary of State is responsible for the maintenance of the voting system in Louisiana, for the maintenance of it. Pretty innocuous bill. And then it gets over to the Senate side, and Mike Reese on the Senate floor very quietly attaches 4 or 5 massively important amendments to this bill that would have vacated the idea of having any kind of an independent forensic audit of electronic voting systems before they're purchased, would have eviscerated the oversight of the Attorney General, essentially eviscerated any oversight in the Secretary of State with regard to her authority over every facet of Louisiana's election system. And it's like, what in the world is this? So even the author of it would have eviscerated what protections 480, which we talked about earlier, did provide in the election system, would have totally vacated it. So I actually found out about the bill originally through the author of 480, Sharon Hewitt, and she said, you know, what protections we have, this bill will absolutely. So we got on board and did a massive push against 856 at that point, and ultimately were able to kill the bill because it went to committee and died. But it really does give you insight, because the Secretary of State was 100% behind that. It gives you insight into exactly what her desires are and were then, which is to have unchecked plenary authority over every aspect of Louisiana's voting system. That's what she wanted then.
Yeah, Chris, and I have here my notes back from 2024, and this is what I had in my notes. Senator Mike Reese added 4 pages of amendments to this two-sentence bill that would have dramatically changed the scope of the authority of the Secretary of State. He did it in a way that made the amendment seem like no big deal, and it was minutes before they were recessing for Memorial Day.
Exactly. And if it wasn't for, just a massive, massive push by grassroots advocates like LeCag, the call to action, we talked about it on the State of Freedom. And I think that would be currently the law in Louisiana. Now we're going to talk about some bills that ultimately chipped away and ultimately allowed her to achieve largely many of the objectives that she wanted in 856, but they
Yeah.
did it in a more piecemeal way.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can move on to those. And Chris, the next one I had on my list for us to talk about was Senator Facey's bill from 2024, his citizenship to vote. I think we probably covered that, unless you had anything else you wanted to mention it.
The only thing I wanted to mention was that the original effective date of that bill, when it passed, was upon governor's signature. That's what the original bill said. So the moment the bill passes, which it passed in June or whatever, and some point it's going to go to the governor and he signs the bill, it would have become effective right then. But because of the Secretary of State, she needed some time to put together the mechanism to implement the new law to require proof of citizenship when people register to vote. She requested that the bill not become effective until January of 2025, which was granted. And yet, still to this day, even though she was given an additional 6 months, here we are now in July of 2026, and 18 months later, and still there is no vigorous enforcement mechanism for that bill and that law. I think it's just a gaping, gaping hole in our system.
And not just that, what does that mean that how do you take that, Chris, personally, as a voter in Louisiana? I take it as a personal insult because to me, it means that you don't really care about whether illegals are voting in our elections or registering to vote in our elections. It means to me that you don't care if my vote is being completely made meaningless because there are illegals voting the opposite direction as me. I don't understand. I mean, I know that she said that, we put our stuff through the SAVE database and we found a certain number of illegals and now they've been removed, so we don't have a problem. But how does that, first of all, I don't believe that's a comprehensive fix. That's just a Band-Aid. And it's not a Band-Aid that covers the whole wound. Number two, what are you doing going forward? Are you just going to do that on a continual basis? Is it continually being uploaded? Like is it a sync kind of situation, or is that a just one and done? Oh, now we have clean voter rolls. There's no illegals on our voter rolls, even though people can obviously still register if they're illegal in Louisiana if there's not being any check done.
Exactly, exactly. And we have to remember, Danielle, this is a state level function, time, manner, and
Yeah.
place of our elections. This is a state level function. And, while there is certainly nothing, in fact, it's laudable to work and to cross reference with the feds, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. This is principally a state level function. And the idea that we would have a law on the books specifically requiring proof of citizenship when a person registers to vote that is not being enforced and in which there has not been any structured guidelines or directives given to the registrars of voters about enforcing this. What proof specifically is required? Just nothing. Again, I think is very, very unfortunate and very revealing, as you indicated.
Yeah, and I guess Chris, now going forward, so a lot of the bills that we've talked about so far have either done something moderately positive or basically neutral, right? And then the one that would have done something negative failed. But now getting into 2025 is when we start seeing some chipping away at at accountability and oversight for the Secretary of State in a meaningful way. House Bill 577 by Representative Darrell Desutel I have here in my notes from last year that it would have provided for the procurement of voting systems and crowned her queen of elections. From
That is exactly right. And the reason why 577 did that, and the reason why we opposed it, and others opposed it on the record, is precisely that it takes our state from a process of competitive bidding, an open and competitive bidding process, to what's called an invitation to negotiate, which means basically the Secretary of State can negotiate or choose not to negotiate with one or more vendors and ultimately make the decision of whatever decision she wants to make. It amends the procurement code to really diminish the oversight of the state procurement office and allows the Secretary of State to really to pick and choose winners and losers with little or no oversight. There's no truly competitive bidding anymore in Louisiana. And so that is why that bill was so dangerous. And I think it was Boyer's bill.
no, it was Desitel.
Oh, Deschatel's bill. Yeah, Deschatel's bill. Okay.
Yeah, and I
And so,
have
yeah,
here.
that's what done.
Sorry, Chris. I have here in my notes that it passed unanimously in the House, and Senator Hodges was the lone member of the entire legislature to vote against it, and that Senator Miguez was absent.
Yes, Hodges, the voice crying in the wilderness.
No
No, no,
kidding.
no. But it really the margin of victory for that bill, despite the fact that essentially just structurally revolutionized the way voting systems are bid on and ultimately chosen in Louisiana, really is a testament to the kind of sort of reflexive homage that our Secretary of State gets in the state
Yeah.
legislature. We've talked about that before, whether or not that is a function of ignorance on the part of our legislators, whether they think that they just trust the Secretary of State with no oversight to protect our election system, or whether or not it reflects a certain amount of wariness on the part of legislators because they recognize that this lady in front of us controls the levers of the state election system. And certainly we don't want to do anything to get on her bad side for that reason. But for whatever reason, 577 is an example of precisely that type of homage that she is afforded in our legislature. But hopefully, those days are coming to an end now because of all of the things that are coming out.
Well, Chris, regardless of motive, regardless of mindset and perspective, you have said repeatedly the job of the legislature with respect to the executive is oversight. And so you can't just hand over the farm and say, it's cool because we trust you to do what's right. No, that's not how it's supposed to work.
It's not how it's supposed to work. In fact, a a tripartite, as our founder said, government system cannot function if the part that's charged with checking and scrutinizing the actions of the other branch, in this case the executive branch, are simply not doing their job. So many of our problems in Louisiana, Danielle, come down to a lack of vigorous legislative oversight over executive agencies and over the executive branch in Louisiana. That's what it comes down to. If they
Yeah.
were exercising that type of robust oversight, we would not have many of the problems that we have. They're not a rubber stamp committee, but they act like that more often than not when it comes to our Secretary of State,
Yeah,
sadly enough.
it's all checks and no balances, Chris. And those are the
It's
kind of
all
checks that
checks and
that we're
yes.
signing. It's the
Oh,
checks we're signing. It's not.
right,
I'm not
right,
talking about actually checking.
right. Exactly, exactly. I love that. I love the play on words.
All right. 2025 also House Bill 592. This is your one by Representative Bo Boye, and this has now allowed for third-party vendors, not allowed, but invited third-party vendors into Louisiana to do voter roll maintenance.
Exactly, and it's really the bill allows the Secretary of State to rely on traditional sources of information like the United States Postal Service in order to determine where someone lives in order to determine where some for purposes of determining whether or not they can vote in Louisiana. And this bill allows also as an option the Secretary of State to confer this responsibility on third party vendors, purely private, for profit vendors, to maintain our voter rolls in Louisiana and determine who's eligible, who's not. And I don't believe that that is a function that should be farmed out to a private party. That is an essential, as you said last time, Danielle, that is an essential function of government that should be handled directly and properly within the Secretary of State's office in conjunction with other election officials, the registrars in Louisiana. It's not something that should be farmed out to a for-profit private vendor. I think it is at least potentially an outsourcing of corruption, and that's what 592 does. Unfortunate that is the case, but again, our Secretary of State traditionally largely gets what she wants.
Yeah. And just on that, of course, I'll just beat my little horse over here that if we even need to have voter rolls to maintain, right? But like there's not enough data farming going on in our lives as it is that we need third party vendors to have all of our data. I mean, why don't we just, I mean, we could just put our data on our foreheads at this point and walk around with it.
Exactly, exactly. So, it's just truly unbelievable that as we sit here now, the authenticity, the reliability of our voter registration database in Louisiana is entirely in the hands of a third party private contractor who is not directly accountable to the voters of Louisiana. And that really, really does need to change.
Yeah. And I'll just take this opportunity, Chris, to remind folks that this was also a bill that had some dirty dealing going on with it. And you will remember very, very starkly, Chris, that Chairman Klein Peter tried to undermine our newly partially closed primaries to give Bill Cassidy the edge in the now, in this U.S. Senate race. And that attempt was thwarted. I believe, and you can remind me, he was carrying that proposed amendment or that intent. I don't even know if it made it into an amendment. Actually, it may have for Speaker Henry
Yeah, the amendment was
or
discussed, and it was
President Henry.
President Henry. The amendment was discussed, and it would have really allowed Bill Cassidy to
Sail through.
bypass the Republican primary to become an unaffiliated candidate and then bypass the Republican primaries and go straight into a general election as an unaffiliated candidate against the Republican winner and the Democrat winner. And because Cassidy thought, this is I can't win a Republican primary. There's no way I can do it. So how do I bypass that and go straight to a general? And that was the reason, I believe, why that bill was brought. The bill was killed, fortunately, because the sole purpose for it was to provide a mechanism for Bill Cassidy to return to the U.S. Senate. But the principal purpose, Danielle, of 592 was again to allow the private contracting of our voter data and our voter registration system to a third party.
Yeah. And I have here that the bill passed the House in a fairly bipartisan manner, 74-16. And the Senate is where the dirty amendment came in the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee. And Senator Hodges was, again, the only senator to vote against it.
Yes, Senator Hodges, to her credit, the voice crying in the wilderness.
Yeah. Now we're coming up on a bill that people have heard us talk about. I mean, we just beat this drum. We beat this drum last year so hard and so often and so loud, and that was Senate Bill 80 by Senator Comrade Greg Miller. And this is a bill that essentially silences the voice of citizens wanting to put any kind of check on the veracity of the outcome of elections in their precinct.
Yes, and this is a bill, Danielle, that voters absolutely must know how their representatives and how their senators voted on it. One of the few remaining mechanisms in Louisiana for citizens to determine the extent to which the numbers and the votes being spit out by these computers is accurate or are accurate is through what's called, you know, uh, election polling or
Exit polling.
exit polling, where citizens go and very lawfully and peacefully conduct exit polls. They ask people as they leave the polls, "How did you vote?" Boom, we got this, and then comparing those results against what is being reported by these computers, and SB 80 now prohibits law abiding citizens from conducting those types of exit polls. But CNBC and CNN and other national organizations are free to do exit polls, use that data for whatever purpose they want. I think it's absolutely reprehensible. And we are continuing to raise the alarm about SB 80. That was part of Nancy Landry's election package in that year. And the pretext upon which she passed that bill was just so reprehensibly dishonest. It's unbelievable. Basically saying these elderly ladies up in Shreveport were causing a scene at a local voting precinct in Shreveport, which they absolutely were not doing. The reason why Nancy Landry wanted this bill was because she does not want any check against the results generated by these computer-based voting systems. And that would have been one really, really good way to expose discrepancies in that system. And she killed it through SB
Yeah.
80. Greg Miller. That's exactly right. And we need to make sure our listeners know how people voted, how
I
our
have the
legislators
list.
voted.
I
Yeah,
do have the list if you want me to read them out,
I
Chris.
do.
Okay, so I have the folks who voted. These are the pro free speech Republicans. So they are the ones who voted against the bill. And
Against the grotesque violation of free expression in
yeah,
Louisiana.
yeah, and they were Beryl Amade, Tony Bacala, Rhonda Butler, Josh Carlson, DeWitt Carrier, Emily Chenevere, Kim Coates, Ray Cruz, Kelly Dickerson, Jessica Domingue, Kathy Edmonston, Peter Egan, Gabe Ferment, Brian Fontenot, Jay Galley, Dodie Horton, Jacob Landry, Shane Mack, Danny McCormick, Jake McFarland, Michael Melloran, Joe Angeron, Chuck Owen, Rodney Shammerhorn, Philip Tarver, Lauren Ventrilla, Roger Wilder, and Jeff Wiley. And that was it was a 56-39 vote, and there were 28 Republicans, so there must have been some Democrats. I don't have them here in my
Yeah.
list, but I do have the Republicans in the Senate who voted against it, and they were Rick Edmonds, Mike Facey, Valerie Hodges, Blake Miguez, and Alan Seabaugh. And
Yeah.
Robert Allen was absent for that.
Yeah. So some credit here, where
Yeah,
credit is due. We are on the wrong side with of Joe Orgeron, Jessica Domain, more often than not. But as is our custom, credit where credit is due. Both Jessica
that's right.
Domain and Joe Orgeron both voted against this bill that grotesquely violates the right of law-abiding citizens to exercise their First Amendment right to conduct exit polls. So thank you, Jessica Domain and Joe Orgeron, for seeing that and voting against that bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I thought we could take just a moment here to remind folks that not only were we super steamed about this when the bill was moving through the legislature because of the censorship aspect of it, because of the violation of the First Amendment, but we were really upset about it because the Secretary of State's office in Louisiana has a track record of censorship that was exposed in the wake of, I think, perhaps maybe it was some of the Twitter files, but also you mentioned when we were doing show prep this morning that it was ultimately in Missouri v. Biden that some of what was going on in the Secretary of State's office came to light. Would you remind folks what our Secretary of State's office was doing to censor the voices of patriots in the aftermath of 2020?
Absolutely. Kyle Ardoin was the Secretary of State then. Nancy Landry was one of his top people, if not his first assistant during that time. And it's proven through documentary evidence, through emails, that the Secretary of State was acting in collusion with Facebook and other social media platforms, along with the federal government, to suppress and shadow ban constitutionally protected speech online. There's no question they were reporting speech that went counter to their narrative about COVID, about elections, about election systems, and all that sort of thing. There's no question that they were actively involved in an effort to censor constitutionally protected speech. No question. Cal Ardoin actually went around that time on a Zoom call for NAS and lauded the fact that the state was working with their federal partners in order to combat malinformation and misinformation. And of course, he didn't say right then and there that they were engaged in this ticket system where they report speech that they don't like, they get shadow banned. But clearly, the implication there was that, well, we're going to do whatever we have to do, whether it's legal or illegal, to make sure that any information that runs counter to our narrative is suppressed. And that's exactly what they were doing. And so Nancy Landry does have a history. And she was not the Secretary of State, but as I said, she was the top person in his office. And now on SB 80, she is really exemplifying her effort and her desire and her willingness to suppress constitutionally protected speech through these banning of these exit polls. So yes, there's absolutely a history there, no question.
And I think it's very timely that we're having this conversation right now because it's been a little while since I've gotten put in the outbox from the blue social media site, and you had both of us got put into the outbox of the blue social media site a couple weeks ago. Maybe it's been a week now, Chris. I was able, I believe, to get my situation resolved. You are yet to be able to share any information, but I can tell people what it was that started upsetting the blue social media site, which is discussion about the NDAs and the rise of the AI data centers. That really, really had them clamp down. And I would also just, draw a reference that the blue social media site has an AI that is building a Manhattan-sized project in Louisiana that they probably are a little upset that we might not be speaking too highly about. So keep your head on a swivel, folks. I also want to say, Chris, and I'm going to take this opportunity. I got a community violation. We got a community violation yesterday in TikTok. And I just want to play for everybody the video that we got the community violation on because it's a red flag for me that this is still going on and still on this topic. So let me just play that video now, Chris, if you're good with it.
Many election integrity technical experts from around the country have told us that Louisiana's elections are the easiest to cheat because we have never been audited. We can't be audited because we do not have paper ballots as a record to compare against the vote, right? Against the results. And so I have believed for some time that Dominion and nefarious actors have used Louisiana as a sandbox to test out different tweaks in the software to accomplish different nefarious manipulations because the chances of them getting caught in Louisiana are near zero because of lack of ballots. Therefore, I think that federal law enforcement has probably already looked at our election system, and we have military intelligence working on this.
So I don't know what was so objectionable about that. I mean, I guess I do, in a way, know what was objectionable about that, Chris. Where Dr. Russ was naming names of systems and talking about election fraud and the insecurity of Louisiana's election systems. But I just wanted to draw that out that we did get dinged on TikTok for that.
Well, and is there any surprise that that would have been something that they would have responded that way too. There's no
Yeah.
question. I mean, he's sitting here and he's talking very directly about the singular vulnerabilities of our voting system in Louisiana. And it's the very same thing that resulted in shadow banning and censorship before. But getting back, Danielle, to our point, LACAG is now, as you said a minute ago, been substantially restricted in our ability to share, to comment, or to share to groups or to comment on other groups regarding these NDAs and these data centers. There's no question. And supposedly we're in the box now until October 10th. We're not allowed to share our thoughts and share our arguments on these NDAs and on these data centers. It's extraordinary. And it happened right after we shared the very first exposition on these NDAs on our social media, on the blue platform, as you said. And so there's no question that those two things are related. I mean, after all, Danielle, Facebook is owned by Meta. It's a Meta data center, right? So I guess it's in a sort of a perverse way, if you're going to censor speech on platforms, I guess that would be one that they would be motivated to censor if we're exposing all the vulnerabilities in these data centers and how people oppose them, and specifically these NDAs that these elected officials sign. So we're protesting this, appealing this, and hopefully we're going to be back. We will be back with our ability to share very broadly very soon. And it's amazing, Danielle, that even though we can't share,
You can still
we're st-
post.
we can still post, and we're still getting a lot of reach despite that. So people
Yeah.
are fighting back. People understand what's going on here, and really doing everything they can to make sure that our message continues to get out.
It's really gross, but we can't it's just a great reminder that we can't trust or rely on these platforms to be our mechanism for a voice. So if you ever can't find us wherever you usually find us, go to our website, freedomstate.us. It has links across the top to every single platform we're on. And I would say, Rumble, we know to be a free speech place. I think we're more censored on basically all the rest of them, suppressed and censored. So if I would say, if you could subscribe, go ahead and subscribe on Rumble if you haven't subscribed there, because I think they are the least likely to take us down. But you can also catch us on just our website. Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
be able to at least get the latest audio only version of our show. Yeah. All right. Well, with that advertisement, Chris, let's talk about. We did this a couple weeks ago, but I think it's just in the frame of all of this election related legislation. You thought it would be a great idea to just refresh people on the erosion. You're putting down every single piece of change in your pocket one by one.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Danielle. It's not much.
Anyway, I lost my train of thought. To remind people of what's happened with the mail-in ballots and the laws that have eroded the security of mail-in ballots since 2024. So why don't you take us down that memory lane, Chris, and just tell us what's happened to our mail-in ballots since 2024 up until and including this year.
Well, 2024, Danielle, there was a bill, Polly Thomas's bill, I think it was HB 581, that said that a witness to a mail-in ballot, the person that's verifying the authenticity and the identity of a voter who's mailing in a ballot, it required them to include their mailing address. The witness would have to have their mailing address. But then very quickly thereafter in the bill, it says failure to do so does not result, is not challengeable. So you're required to do it, but you can't challenge a ballot if a witness has not included their mailing address. And so what's the point of the law? What's the point of the bill? Also, that same year, Heather Cloud, I believe, her bill would have required the what I'm trying to consider. Remember,
I can help you out
yeah.
here. I have it Senate Bill 226, which became Act 321, and it was designed to automatically challenge, sorry, not change. Automatic, that would be something, wouldn't it? Automatically challenge ballots missing required information, but another critical carve out was added.
Yes. So here's the deal. The bill would have specifically said that, a voter who's doing a mail-in ballot has to include their mother's maiden name, just to, as one mechanism of verifying the authenticity of the voter. So the bill required that, but then again said failure to include that information does not result in a challengeable offense. So you can't challenge a ballot on that basis. So again, what's the point of the requirement if there's no enforceable action that can be taken if the requirement is not met? It's almost as though they're trying to they're trying to act as though they're doing something to secure the mail-in ballots, when in reality it's toothless.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then there was another bill brought this year, and we mentioned it already, Chris, but HB 842 did have some provisions in it that it's like anybody can just do a mail-in ballot.
This was absolutely extraordinary, Danielle. Absolutely extraordinary. It did away. 842 did away with the requirement that one of the things it did away with the requirement that the witness on a mail-in ballot has to print their name. They have to print their name. Well, now there's no requirement that a witness to a mail-in ballot has to print their name. They scribble something down, may not even be able to read it. And so for all practical purposes, there really is no way to determine who the witness was, to verify the identity of the witness themselves to the authenticity of a mail-in ballot. Beryl Amade said, "What is going on here? This is ridiculous." So she offered an amendment to put that back into the bill to require that a witness to a mail-in ballot has to print their name on it. That ultimately, it got back into the bill, but ended up being excised out of it in conference committee. So it ended up not being in the final legislation. So as it stands now, under 842, a witness to a mail-in ballot, the very person who is verifying the authenticity and the identity of the voter, does not have to print their name. Their name has to be nowhere printed on the mail-in ballot. Danielle, I don't know of any legal document, any subpoena, anything, when you notarize a document in Louisiana, you always have to print the name of the witnesses and the party signing along with their signature. But apparently when it comes to mail-in ballots, that basic minimal proof used to authenticate the authenticity of a voter is not necessary. The witness does not have to print their name on the envelope on a mail-in ballot. That is unbelievable to me.
And one thing I'll just remind people, this part of the legislative session was happening, I believe, when Spencer Pratt was ramping up his ramping up his run for mayor of Los Angeles. And one of the things he exposed early on, actually, it was not even Spencer Pratt, it was James O'Keefe that exposed the way that they are registering homeless people to vote in Los Angeles and how it's just patently illegal the way that they're doing it. So there's proof on the mainstream media in the nightly news that there are liberties being taken with voter rolls and with absentee ballots, and our legislature just moved straight ahead and did this on purpose. It's not like the legislation already existed and they didn't do anything about it. In seeing that, they literally purposefully did a carve out that said this. When someone tried to fix it, Representative Amade, and everybody agreed with it, they said, okay, well, even though all y'all said that you think that this writing the witness's name down is important, we're going to take it out anyway, folks. We're taking it out anyway.
Yes, and the very author, when it went to conference committee on the House side, the author of the bill, Boye, also Polly Thomas, and there was one other on the House side, and then over on the Senate side, Walmick, Klein Peter, and one other on that side too were in the
Probably
conference
Miller,
committee.
maybe
Miller,
Miller.
yes. And so, what do you expect would be their target? Of course, to excise that out of the bill. I cannot understand, Danielle, for the life of me, why, when it comes to our vote and all of the problems that we have had and we know can occur with mail-in ballots, that a requirement that a witness to a mail-in ballot would not be required to print their name. It just blows my mind. Blows my
Well,
mind.
clearly someone's being helped by it.
Clearly, someone's being helped by it. We know that the result is an unfortunate and further erosion of the integrity of mail-in ballots in Louisiana. No question about it.
Yeah. Okay, so where we are now. This if your mind hasn't been blown already, I think it's going to be blown now. So we know that President Trump made his big speech on Thursday. We know that Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen from DHS came out on Friday, gave his presser, said, machines, we're going to come up with a patch. But first, we're going to do this report, and we'll come back to you in 30 days with a report. The clock is obviously ticking on that now. We're probably about 5 days into that. And then, to blow everybody's mind, Secretary Landry made an announcement. Now, y'all know I've been pretty salty about Secretary Landry not making any announcements with regard to her response to the president's speech, her plan to support the president in whatever way possible to make sure that our elections are secured here in Louisiana. Just absolute crickets on that point. However, she has made it public that she is going to host a voting computer demonstration next week on July 29th for Smartmatic. And I will just post up to you here the announcement. Secretary Landry announces voting system public demonstration as part of the state's efforts. Sorry, I can't really see it because there's something, I have a tack in the middle of the anyway, to acquire fully auditable voting system, Louisiana Secretary of State Nancy Landry invites the public to view a demonstration of a voting system that's being tested for certification for use. A public demonstration will be held from 9 to noon on Wednesday, July 29th at the Louisiana State Archives for the Smartmatic VSR 1 2.1 voting system. Smartmatic was the only additional vendor to respond to the final invitation for certification ahead of the procurement process. A new voting system is expected to be selected by the end of the year. The Secretary of State's office previously held a certification period in August and September of 2025. The state certified 5 voting systems and 1 ballot marking device during that period. Those systems and component parts do not need to be recertified. The public demonstration will take place at the Louisiana State Archives, located at 3851 Essen Lane in Baton Rouge. According to Act 480 of the 2021 regular legislative session, certification of a voting system or system component is required in order to be eligible to receive a procurement contract for Louisiana's voting system per the issued standards viewable here.
It's important, Danielle, to look at who this Smartmatic is. Look, apart from the fact that we are opposed to any electronic-based voting system because they're all vulnerable, why would Smartmatic even have a seat at the table? Under the new law in Louisiana, Nancy Landry has the authority to issue invitations to negotiate. She essentially has plenary authority to deal with whomever she wants to deal with. Smartmatic should not even be at the table. This is a Venezuelan-based election vendor whose executives are under current federal indictment for trying to rig an election contract, a vendor contract, in the Philippines. Money laundering, bribery to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. These are the founders of the Smartmatic voting system. Why would they even be given a nod with regard to the possibility of being in control of our new voting system, a vendor for our new electronic voting system. It's absolutely extraordinary that they would even be sitting at the table, that we would be giving them the time of the day. They should have been presumptively disqualified in the initial screening, and I cannot imagine, and maybe I should be able to imagine, I cannot imagine that Smartmatic would ultimately be the company to which our Secretary of State would award a $100 million voting contract. If that is the case, then I can tell you right now, people will absolutely be amassing on the Hill, and there will be major, major outcry over this. It just blows my mind that Smartmatic would be in this conversation.
Draw your own conclusions, people. That is all I will say here. If they've been indicted for bribery and for throwing elections, just draw your own conclusions.
I can't believe it. Christy Hike of Louisiana Republican Assembly has issued a call for major objections to this. I think you said the actual demonstration will occur on July 29th. Danielle, is that at the old state capitol or the old archives?
Yeah, and we'll be, and we would encourage people to absolutely attend. And anyone who's in the Warrior Circle that is in attendance, we would love for you to call in from the demonstration and let us know how things are going, because we'll have a show going at that time. So I think that would be pretty cool to hear directly from people while they are there, even if they might have to step out, because I'm sure they'll get hollered at if they're if they're there on their phones. I don't even know if they let people show their phones, take their phones out. I believe it was Bert who tried to do a little video inside of the last demonstration that happened, I believe, in early January of this year, and they all but threw him out on his ear.
Yeah, yes, they did. And Danielle, contrary to my instincts and based upon what I've seen in the past, I will entertain the possibility that the Secretary of State is doing this in order to avoid pushback from Smartmatic, saying that, look, maybe we are under federal indictment, maybe we do have a horrible reputation, maybe we are under federal scrutiny for trying to rig elections, but nonetheless, we have a certification system. We are properly, quote, certified. So you have to give us an opportunity to demonstrate our system. And maybe that's why she's trying to do it. Maybe she already knows that there's no way that she's going to award a contract to Smartmatic, but we shall see. And I really think that real leadership, though, in this situation would say, look, we already have enough evidence that this is not the type of company that we want to be dealing with. And so, sorry, but they're preemptively disqualified. I think it's basically a waste of time, effort, and resources, what she's trying to do on July 29th to even give these people a seat at the table. My opinion, and I would imagine it's the opinion of an awful lot of other people in Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, again, what some people see as a black mark may be a very attractive feature for others. That's all I'll say about that.
Absolutely, Danielle. You know, one person's poison is another person's panacea, as they say.
They say that?
Absolutely. One person's poison is an absolute cure-all to other people, depending on which side of the aisle you happen to be standing on.
There you go. Well, I did want to play Christy's video, Chris, about Smartmatic, and I'll just put it up here real quick. And I'm stopping the audio so we can hear it, and I might, let's see. I'll put you here, Chris. And let's see if we can read this. Now, it's super tiny on my screen. It says, Louisiana voters pay attention. The president says the machines can't be trusted. Louisiana Secretary of State is rolling one out anyway from a company under federal indictment. The vendor, Smartmatic, the charge, bribery and money laundering, the evidence, a $300 million slush fund, and she wants it running your vote. See it yourself, Louisiana State Archives, and she gives the date, which is next Wednesday, 9 to noon. Y'all okay with that? I'm not okay with that, Chris. I know you're not okay with that.
Absolutely not okay with that. And, you know, the Secretary of State absolutely needs to know that people understand what's going on here. Danielle, you know, there's no question that this is something that If she does, I just think there's going to be major backlash, even from people, Danielle, who are not as inherently skeptical about all electronic voting systems as we are. This really just adds insult to injury. If you've got
100%.
to use an electronic voting system, these are the very last people on earth that you should be contracting with or dealing with. And I think most Louisiana citizens absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I think so too. I absolutely think so too, Chris. Well, that rounds us out. We went a little bit longer than probably intended, but there was a whole lot to get through. I have a couple of announcements unless you have something else you want to round out with.
I just want to reiterate, Danielle, that the I think the citizens of Louisiana every day are becoming more and more and more skeptical about computer based voting generally. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the Department of Homeland Security comes out with in the next 25, 6 days now. They're going to come out with a report with specific directives to the state about how to secure the voting system. I'm assuming that these recommendations will be made within the context of a computer-based voting system, but I'm just curious to see what they're going to recommend to see if they actually, if they're implemented, actually can and will secure at least to a greater degree electronic voting in Louisiana and in the country. I'm just curious to see what Secretary Mullen comes up with, Danielle. Because look, the bottom line is, although most people agree that there's no way to secure electronic voting, computer-based voting 100%, I don't think they would argue that there are certainly things that can be done perhaps to make them less insecure. And so we'll see. We'll see what he
Yeah.
comes up with. And as Dr. Russ said, Danielle, a couple of days ago, there's a very real possibility that Mullen and President Trump already know that there is no computer-based voting system in the world that is invulnerable to hacking and the type of manipulation we've been talking about. And perhaps the reason why they're doing this is sort of an interim step to come to the ultimate conclusion and public pronouncement. No, we tried. This can't be done. Unfortunately, we just can't use computers anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if that's ultimately where we're going. I think Dr. Russ has surmised basically that.
Yeah, and in my conversation with General Holt yesterday, he said that there is a company out of Germany called Saxon that has developed a quantum chip that can compute at one qubit a qubit a second or something like that. Anyway, I don't even understand the measure of a qubit because it's so fast, and I think it's a new thing. They had to come up with a new name for a new speed of computing power, or I don't know if it's a speed. I'm way out of my league right now, but I think it may be the amount of data, right? Like the amount of data that can be processed, like a megabyte, but terabyte. At some point after that is qubit, is what I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that to say, it can process a tremendous amount of data in a very, in 1 second. So what does that mean for hackers? If you can process that amount of data that quickly, everything suddenly becomes more vulnerable. He said, if you have any information on any device, they're all insecure now. You just have to assume that anybody can see anything.
Yeah. President Trump is always, Danielle, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of the game.
Yeah.
And I think that he may be anticipating institutional resistance to what his own ultimate objective is,
Yeah.
which he's talked about before: paper ballots, secure hand-marked paper ballots. He's made it very clear before. And so this looks like it could be an interim step to achieve an ultimate objective. And so we'll see what comes out in this report.
Yeah, we'll see what comes out in the report. In terms of announcements, next week we have a very solid lineup, very exciting lineup. I'm not going to tell you who's coming because I want you to be looking on our social media. Warriors, you'll find out later today who we will be having next week. A reminder that if you're in the Warriors Circle, you have the right to submit questions in advance for us to consider to ask our guests. And on Wednesday, you can call in to the Freedom Phone and you can have a rant, you can ask a question, you can give intel on what's happening at the Secretary of State's demonstration. So by all means, Warriors have the edge on that. And if you want to join the Warriors Circle, and support the show and have some exclusive access, you can do that at join.freedomstate.us. Let's see. We need your help in this fight. We can't do it alone, and we need you to be part of what we're doing. And so if you enjoy what we bring you, if you feel like this information is honest and information you can't get anywhere else, then please join the Warrior Circle. And the backbone behind the State of Freedom, by all means, is Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, the work that Chris is doing in the legislature, and the work that we are doing, digging into all kinds of bills, present, past, and the kind of bills that we're hoping to see brought in the future. Support LeCag as well for the price of a medium or a large pizza, depending on how many toppings you get.
Yes, absolutely. depending on the number of toppings you get, exactly. But it is a worthy investment, Danielle, and because really everything that you and I do is premised on really the foundational principle that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and when we are communicating things that people really, really need to know, and trying to make those communications as broad as possible, and also trying, of course, to hold our elected officials accountable to the citizens. We've got to have the support of the citizens to do that. And I'm just so thankful that we have the State of Freedom. I'm so thankful that we have LeCag. And I think, as I've said to you before, Danielle, we are all you have, but guess what? We're all you need if you support us and help us and spread the word. So always a tremendous pleasure to be with you, Danielle. It just seems like it flies by whenever we get together.
Well, that's true. And I want to make one more announcement before we officially shove off. But if you are very interested in the developments related to elections, you will not want to miss Unauthorized Storm Summit. That is coming up in September 10th through 13th. And you can sign up for that at stormsummit.us. If you want to be there in person in Las Vegas, there's an incredible lineup. Peter Tickton, Professor Clements, General Holt, Roseanne Barr, Tina Peters, Joe Hoft, so many amazing patriots. And we would love to be there right with you. So if you are planning to go, if you sign up, by all means, let us know, because we'll love to coordinate with you. And I think that is it, Chris.
I think that takes care of it, Danielle. I think we covered the major issues here. I'm very thankful that we were able to be a portal of communication today on an issue of such massive importance. Danielle, as you have said so often, more important than anything else is the security and the reliability of our voting system. I know that DHS agrees with us, President Trump agrees with us, and we just have to continue to beat the drum until we get what we want and what Louisiana citizens are absolutely entitled to: full transparency and full reliability in our voting system.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were reminding each other this morning that the government is not here to govern our behavior. We are here to govern their behavior.
I absolutely love it. They are accountable to us. Every bit of power that they have, Danielle, is a temporary ceding of our natural rights and our authority to them under the condition that they guard and zealously protect our core foundational rights. And we intend to continue to hold them accountable to just that. Too many of them have forgotten, and they think that we are beholden to them. In reality, they are beholden to us. We are the sovereigns, and they are the servants. And they should all be reminded of that on a daily basis.
Amen, Chris. All right. Well, I will see you on Tuesday, sir.
God bless you.
God bless you.
Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you. Fuego is just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Calle Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville in the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Calle Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast in Louisiana.